It was midnight, and the rain hammered against the windows like angry fists. Sarah sat alone in her dimly lit living room, clutching a photograph tightly in her trembling hands. Her eyes darted toward the staircase where faint footsteps echoed soft. Deliberate and far too familiar, but no one else was home, or so she thought. Who? There, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm outside. The footsteps stopped. Silence enveloped the house, suffocating her, and then came the whisper, a cold breath brushing against her ear. "You didn't think I'd forget, did you?" Sarah froze. That voice, it couldn't be. She had buried him 6 months ago. Her mind raced back to the day everything changed. It had been an ordinary morning. Daniel was making coffee in the kitchen, humming softly to himself, while Sarah flipped through the newspaper. They were happy, or at least that's what she told herself every night before falling asleep. But happiness was fragile, and theirs shattered in an instant. Daniel had left for work that morning, promising to return early for dinner. He never came back. Instead, Sarah received a call from the police informing her that his car had skidded off the road during a heavy downpour. The vehicle was found submerged in a nearby river, with his body still inside. At first she mourned deeply, crying herself to sleep every night, clutching his pillow, just to feel close to him again. But as weeks turned into months, something shifted. She began noticing small things around the house. A book misplaced on the shelf when she was sure she had organized it perfectly earlier that day. The faint smell of his cologne lingering in rooms he hadn't entered in years. Then came the whispers late at night when the world outside fell silent. They started faintly, almost like the wind brushing past her ears. But soon they grew louder, clearer, until one evening she heard it plain as day. "I'm still here," she tried to convince herself. It was grief playing tricks on her mind. After all, losing someone you love could make you imagine all sorts of things. But deep down she knew this wasn't normal. This wasn't just her imagination. Tonight, however, felt different. The air was heavier, charged with an energy that made her skin crawl. She stood up slowly, placing the photograph face down on the coffee table, and moved toward the staircase. Each step creaked beneath her weight, amplifying the silence around her. When she reached the top, she paused, listening intently. There it was again, those footsteps moving steadily toward the end of the hallway, where her bedroom lay. Her heart pounded wildly in her chest as she pushed open the door, half expecting to see Daniel standing there, smiling at her like nothing had happened. But the room was empty, just as she had left it earlier that day. Yet something was off. The bed covers were rumpled slightly, as if someone had been lying there moments ago, and on the bedside table sat a single red rose, petals glistening with dew. Despite the lack of sunlight, Sarah picked up the rose, examining it closely. Its stem was thornless and unnaturally smooth, almost plastic-like. She dropped it immediately, feeling a wave of nausea wash over her. "What is happening to him?" As if in response, the temperature in the room plummeted, forcing her to wrap her arms around herself for warmth. Her breath misted in front of her face, even though the heater downstairs was running full blast. Suddenly, the mirror above her dresser caught her attention. At first glance, nothing seemed amiss. But then she saw it, a shadowy figure standing behind her, unmoving, staring directly at her through the glass. Spun around, but there was no one there, just the empty space between her and the wall. Panic surged through her veins, and she bolted out of the room, slamming the door shut behind her. She leaned against it, breathing heavily, trying to steady herself, but the whispers returned louder this time, filling the entire hallway. "You can't run forever." Tears streamed down her face as memories flooded back. Memories she had buried alongside Daniel. The arguments, the lies, the secrets she kept hidden even from herself. And now he was back, demanding answers. Desperate for some form of control, she decided to search the house thoroughly, convinced that whatever was haunting her must have a source, a trigger, something tangible she could confront. Her search led her to the basement, a place she rarely ventured into due to its dampness and eerie atmosphere. She fumbled with the light switch, illuminating the cluttered space filled with old furniture, boxes, and forgotten belongings. In the far corner, partially concealed by a dusty tarp, she spotted something unusual, a wooden door she didn't remember Seeing before curiosity outweighed fear, and she approached it cautiously. The door was locked but not secured properly. With a firm tug, it swung open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Against her better judgment, she stepped inside. Gripping the railing tightly as she descended deeper into the unknown at the bottom, she found a small room barren, except for a desk and a single chair. On the desk lay a journal, its cover worn and faded. Her name was scrawled across the front in handwriting that wasn't hers. Pounding, she opened it, flipping through pages filled with entries detailing events she couldn't recall experiencing. Events involving betrayal, deceit, and ultimately death. The final entry sent chills down her spine. If you're reading this, you already know run before. She could process what it meant. The lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness. Footsteps echoed from above, growing louder with each passing second. Sarah clutched the journal tightly in her hands as darkness engulfed the basement. Her breathing came in shallow gasps, each exhale visible in the cold air that surrounded her. The footsteps grew louder, echoing from above like a drumbeat, counting down to something inevitable. She knew she had to move, but fear rooted her to the spot. Memories of Daniel flooded her mind unbidden. His laughter, his touch, the way he used to look at her, as if she were the only person in the world. But those memories now felt tainted, twisted by the Pomvi. Words written in the journal run. The word repeated itself over and over in her head, urging her to flee. But where could she go when the walls of her own home seemed alive with malice? When the man she thought she had buried was somehow still here? Watching, waiting, summoning every ounce of courage, she stumbled up the staircase, tripping once and scraping her knee on the rough wooden steps. Pain shot through her leg, but she ignored it, driven by sheer desperation. As she reached the top, the door slammed shut behind her, trapping her in the basement. No, her voice trembled as she yanked on the handle again and again, but it wouldn't budge. Panic clawed at her chest, making it hard to breathe. She turned around, scanning the dimly lit space for another way out. There was none. Suddenly, a faint glow appeared in the corner of the room, illuminating a figure standing motionless beneath the stairwell. Sarah froze, unable to tear her eyes away from the silhouette. It was tall and thin, its features obscured by shadows. "Are you afraid?" The question hung in the air, heavy and mocking. Sarah opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The figure took a step forward, then another, until it stood just inches away from her. Its presence radiated an unnatural coldness that seeped into her bones. "You should be." With those words, the figure vanished, leaving Sarah alone once more. The glow faded, plunging the basement back into darkness. Shaking uncontrollably, she sank to the floor, hugging her knees to her chest. "What do you want from me?" Her whispered plea echoed unanswered in the silence. Meanwhile, miles away, in a dense forest shrouded by mist, a group of friends huddled around a campfire, trying to ward off the chill of the night. Among them was Jake, a rugged outdoorsman who prided himself on his survival skills. Beside him sat Emma, quiet and observant, her gaze fixed on the flames. They had come here seeking adventure, escaping the monotony of their daily lives. But what started as a fun weekend getaway quickly turned ominous. "Tell us another story," Jake said, breaking the uneasy silence that had settled over the group. Emma hesitated, glancing at the others before speaking softly. Her voice carried a weight that made everyone lean in closer. "There's a legend about these woods," she began, her words slow and deliberate. "They say there's a spirit here, one that feeds on regret and sorrow. Those who wander too deep often find themselves lost, not just physically but emotionally." Jake chuckled, dismissing her tale as nothing more than folklore. But Emma's expression remained serious. "I'm not joking," she said firmly. "People have gone missing here, entire groups vanishing without a trace. Some claim they hear whispers calling their names, luring them deeper into the forest." The group fell silent, the crackling of the fire, the only sound breaking the tension. Until Mark, one of the more skeptical members, decided to lighten the mood. "All right." Then he said, standing up and grabbing a flashlight, "Let's test this legend, see if any spirits decide to show up." Despite protests from both Emma and Jake, Mark ventured into the trees, disappearing into the thick fog within moments. The rest of the group exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to do. Should go after him, Emma urged, her voice tinged with urgency. Jake nodded reluctantly, and together they followed Mark's trail. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing gnarled tree branches and twisted roots that seemed to reach out like skeletal hands. As they walked deeper into the forest, the air grew colder, and the silence became oppressive. Even the sounds of their footsteps seemed muffled, swallowed by the oppressive atmosphere. Finally, they found Mark standing frozen in a small clearing, his face pale, his eyes wide with terror. He pointed toward a cluster of trees where a figure emerged, slowly stepping into view. It was a woman dressed in tattered clothing, her hair wild and unkempt. Her eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, locking onto each of them with an intensity that made their blood run cold. Leave. She whispered, her voice barely audible, yet carrying a command that couldn't be ignored. None of them needed to be told twice. They turned and ran blindly through the forest, branches whipping at their faces and roots, threatening to trip them at every step. When they finally burst out of the trees, collapsing onto the safety of their campsite, they realized something was wrong. Mark wasn't with them. "Where is he?" Jake demanded, his voice shaking. Emma shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "We left him behind." Guilt weighed heavily on all of them, but none more so than Emma. She had warned them about the legend, yet they hadn't listened. Now Mark was gone, lost to the forest and whatever dark force resided within it. Back in Sarah's house, dawn broke, weak sunlight filtering through the cracks in the basement door. She lay curled up on the floor, exhausted from hours of crying and futile attempts to escape. The journal still clutched in her hand felt heavier than ever. As light filled the room, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. Carved into the wall beside her were names, dozens of them, etched deeply into the wood, and among them was hers, Sarah Bennett. Her breath hitched as realization dawned. These weren't random names. They belonged to people who had lived in her house before her, people who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. A sudden noise startled her, the sound of keys jingling outside the basement door. Slowly the lock clicked, and the door creaked open, revealing a figure silhouetted against the morning light. Daniel. He stood there staring at her, his expression unreadable. For a moment she thought maybe everything would be okay. Maybe he had returned to explain why he haunted her, why he refused to let her go. But then he smiled, and it wasn't the smile she remembered. It was cold, cruel, and devoid of humanity. "Welcome home," he said, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. The basement door clicked shut behind Daniel, sealing Sarah inside once more. His presence loomed over her like a storm cloud, suffocating and inescapable. She scrambled backward until her back hit the cold concrete wall, clutching the journal to her chest, as if it could shield her from whatever he intended to do. "Shouldn't have come back here," Daniel said, his voice calm yet laced with menace. Sarah shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Why are you doing this? What do you want from me?" He didn't answer. Instead, he took slow, deliberate steps toward her, each movement deliberate and calculated. The air around him seemed to grow colder with every step until her breath misted in front of her face, even though the room was already freezing. "I warned you," he finally said, his tone soft but chilling. "Run, run," where she cried, her voice breaking. "You've trapped me here." His smile widened, revealing something sinister beneath it, something that wasn't human. His eyes glowed faintly now, an unnatural hue that made her stomach churn. "You chose this path, Sarah, not me." Before she could respond, the ground beneath her feet trembled violently. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and the walls groaned as if the house itself were alive and angry. She covered her head, instinctively bracing for collapse. But instead of destruction, the trembling stopped abruptly, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. When she looked up, Daniel was gone. The basement was empty save for her, and the journal still clutched tightly in her hands. "What is happening?" Her whispered question echoed unanswered in the silence. Miles away in a quiet suburban neighborhood, a young woman named Lily sat alone in her dimly lit kitchen, staring blankly at the wall before her. Her hands trembled slightly as she held a cup of tea, too hot to drink, but comforting to hold nonetheless. Lily had spent most of her life running from the past, burying memories, so Deep she thought they'd never resurface, but lately things had changed. Whispers filled her dreams, voices calling her name, urging her to remember. She tried to ignore them, focusing on mundane tasks, cleaning, cooking, anything to keep her mind occupied. But no matter how hard she tried, the whispers always returned louder each time. Tonight, however, was different. Tonight the whispers weren't just in her dreams. They were real. Lily, the voice came from somewhere inside the house, soft, yet unmistakably clear. She froze, her teacup slipping from her fingers and shattering on the floor. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling. No response. Slowly she stood up, grabbing a flashlight from the counter and moving cautiously toward the source of the sound. It led her to the attic, a place she hadn't ventured into since moving into the house years ago. The wooden stairs creaked under her weight as she ascended, each step amplifying the silence around her. At the top she paused, listening intently. The whispers grew louder here, almost deafening, guiding her toward a dusty trunk tucked away in the corner. With shaking hands she opened it, revealing old photographs, letters, and journals belonging to someone else, someone who had lived in the house long before her. Among the items was a photograph of a family posing happily in front of the very house she now called home. In the background, barely visible through the trees, stood a figure watching them, its face obscured by shadows. Lily's breath caught in her throat as recognition dawned. That figure was the same one she had seen in her dreams countless times before. Suddenly, the attic door slammed shut, trapping her inside. Darkness enveloped her completely, save for the faint beam of her flashlight. She turned it on, illuminating the space around her, only to find the photograph lying face down on the floor. When she picked it up, the image had changed. The happy family was gone, replaced by a single word scrawled across the paper, in jagged handwriting, "Forgive." Lily dropped the photograph as if burned, backing away until she hit the wall behind her. The whispers grew louder, overwhelming her senses until she couldn't distinguish one voice from another. "Leave," they chanted in unison. "Leave or join us back in Sarah's basement." Daylight began to filter through the cracks in the door, signaling morning. She had spent hours huddled in the corner, replaying Daniel's words in her mind, trying to piece together what he meant by choosing this path. As the sunlight grew stronger, the temperature in the room began to rise unnaturally fast. Sweat dripped down her forehead, and her skin prickled with discomfort. Suddenly, the journal in her lap grew warm, almost hot to the touch. Startled, she dropped it onto the floor, where it flipped open to a page she hadn't noticed before. Written in bold letters across the top were two words: connection. Below it was a list of names, including hers, Emma's, Mark's, and now Lily's, each name accompanied by a date and location, all connected somehow through tragedies and disappearances stretching back decades. What does this mean? Her thoughts raced as realization dawned. These weren't isolated incidents. They were part of something bigger, far darker than she had imagined. At that moment, the door to the basement burst open, flooding the room with light. Standing in the doorway was Emma, her face pale and drawn, her eyes wide with fear. "Sarah," she gasped, out of breath. "I don't know how I got here, but we need to leave now." Confusion warred with relief in Sarah's mind. How did Emma know where she was? And why did she look so terrified? "There's no time to explain," Emma urged, grabbing Sarah's arm and pulling her toward the stairs. They ran through the house, neither speaking, as adrenaline coursed through their veins. When they reached the front door, Sarah hesitated, glancing back at the staircase leading to the basement. "We can't just leave," she said, her voice trembling. Emma shook her head firmly. "Trust me, you don't want to stay." Reluctantly, Sarah followed her outside into the bright sunlight. Blinking against the glare, she realized they weren't alone. A car was parked at the curb, its engine running. Inside sat Jake, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. "Get in," he shouted, urgency in his tone. Without questioning further, Sarah and Emma climbed into the vehicle as Jake sped away. Sarah turned to Emma, demanding answers. "How do you know about my house?" she asked, her voice rising. Emma hesitated, glancing at Jake before responding softly. "Because it's not just your house anymore, it's ours." The car sped down the deserted highway, tires screeching against the asphalt. Sarah gripped the edge of her seat, her mind racing with questions. But fear kept her silent. Emma sat beside her staring out the window, her expression unreadable while Jake focused intently on the road, his jaw clenched tightly. "What do you mean it's not just my house?" Sarah finally managed to ask, her voice trembling. Emma turned to face her, eyes filled with pain and guilt. "It's not just your house," she repeated softly. "It's ours. All of us are connected somehow through these places, these tragedies." Sarah's heart pounded in. Her chest connected. How could she be connected to Emma or Jake or even Lily when their lives seemed worlds apart? Jake glanced at them through the rearview mirror. His grip tightened on the steering wheel before he spoke. "We all made mistakes," he said, his voice low and strained. "Mistakes that cost people their lives." "Mistakes?" Sarah echoed incredulously. "What mistakes?" Emma sighed, leaning forward slightly, her hands twisted nervously in her lap. "The forest," she began hesitantly. "That wasn't our first trip there. Years ago we were there with someone else, someone who didn't come back." "Mark," interrupted Jake bitterly. "Mark isn't the first person we've lost in those woods." Sarah stared at them, confusion and dread swirling inside her. "Who are you talking about?" There was a long pause before Emma answered. "Her name was Claire," she said quietly. "She was my sister." Claire had been part of their group, once adventurous and full of life. But during one fateful camping trip she wandered off, alone into the forest, and never returned. They searched for days, calling her name until their voices grew hoarse, but she was gone, and now Mark is gone too." Emma continued, her voice breaking. "I don't think it's a coincidence. None of this is random." The car fell silent save for the hum of the engine and the rush of wind outside. Sarah felt like the weight of the world was pressing down on her shoulders. Everything they were saying sounded impossible, yet she couldn't deny the eerie similarities between their stories and hers. Suddenly Jake slammed on the brakes, throwing them all forward. The car skidded to a halt, narrowly avoiding collision, with a figure standing motionless in the middle of the road. It was Daniel. His form flickered faintly as if caught between worlds, his glowing eyes locked onto Sarah's through the windshield. "Get out of the car," he commanded, his voice echoing unnaturally loud. "No," Jake shouted, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "We're not stopping." But Sarah unbuckled her seatbelt, her movements automatic, as if controlled by some unseen force. She opened the door, stepping out onto the road despite Emma's protests. "Sarah, stop!" Emma cried, reaching for her, but it was too late. Daniel stood mere feet away, his presence radiating coldness that seeped into her very bones. He held out his hand, palm up, as if waiting for her to take it. "Come with me," he said softly. "Come home." "Home," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You're not real. You can't be." But deep down she knew he was real, or at least as real as the memories that haunted her. The journal, the names carved into the basement wall, the whispers that refused to leave her alone. "You chose this path," Daniel reminded her, his tone almost gentle. "I didn't choose anything," she screamed, her voice cracking under the weight of her emotions. "You left me." Flicker of sadness crossed his face, fleeting but undeniable. "Then I'm sorry," he murmured, taking a step closer. Before he could reach her, Emma and Jake appeared, pulling her back toward the car. "Don't listen to him," urged her voice desperate. "He's not here to help you." Sarah resisted, momentarily torn between the man who had once been her husband and the strangers who seemed to understand her pain better than anyone else. "Let go of me," she yelled, struggling against their hold. Jake tightened his grip, refusing to let her go. "We're not losing you too," he said firmly. "Not after everything." For a moment time seemed to freeze. Daniel's gaze locked onto Sarah's, as if trying to convey something words couldn't express. Then without warning he vanished, leaving only the cold night air behind. Back in the safety of the car, Sarah collapsed into her seat, shaking uncontrollably. Emma wrapped an arm around her, offering what little comfort she could, while Jake resumed driving, his knuckles still white. "We need answers," Emma said, eventually breaking the heavy silence. "There has to be a reason why all of this is happening to us." Jake nodded grimly. "I know a place," he admitted reluctantly. "A place where we might find some." "Where?" Sarah demanded, her voice raw with emotion. "An old cabin, deep in the woods." Jake explained. "It's abandoned now, but people used to say it was cursed. Anyone who stayed there never came Back so naturally we're going there, Emma muttered sarcastically, earning a sharp glance from Jake. If there's any chance of understanding what's happening to us, then yes, we're going. Jake shot back. Sarah listened silently, her mind reeling with conflicting thoughts. Part of her wanted to run far away from this nightmare, while another part yearned for closure, for truth. As dawn broke over the horizon, they arrived at the edge of the forest. The trees loomed tall and foreboding, casting long shadows across the ground. Ahead lay the narrow dirt path leading deeper into the wilderness. Are you sure about this? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper, though Jake admitted, but we don't have a choice. With that, they stepped into the forest, the crunch of leaves beneath their feet the only sound accompanying them. The further they ventured, the colder the air became until their breaths misted visibly in front of them. Finally they reached the cabin, its wooden structure weathered, and decaying vines creeping up its walls like skeletal fingers. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. Furniture lay overturned and broken cobwebs draped across every surface. In the center of the room stood a table covered in photographs, letters, and journals identical to the ones Sarah had found in her basement. As they sifted through the items, piecing together fragments of forgotten lives, they uncovered a chilling pattern. Each story ended tragically: betrayal, loss, grief, followed by disappearances and unexplained phenomena. Then they found a map etched onto the back of one of the journals, locations marked with names, including theirs, connected by lines, forming a web stretching across towns, cities, and forests. This is it, Emma breathed, realization dawning. It's not just us. It's everyone whose lives intersected with these places. Stared at the map, her vision blurring with tears. So what do we do now? We break the cycle, Jake said resolutely. Whatever curse binds us together, we end it here tonight. But how? Emma asked, her voice tinged with doubt. By facing it, Jake replied simply. By confronting the truth, no matter how painful it may be. Night fell. They gathered around a small fire built cautiously inside the cabin. Its flickering light illuminated their faces, highlighting the exhaustion and determination etched into each expression. One by one, they began sharing their deepest regrets, their darkest secrets. The weight of their confessions hung heavy in the air, binding them together in ways they hadn't expected. When it was Sarah's turn, she hesitated, her throat tight with emotion. Finally she spoke, her voice trembling. I killed him, she confessed. I didn't mean to, but I did. Shock rippled through the group, but no one interrupted, allowing her to continue. I couldn't handle the lies anymore, she said, tears streaming down her face. So I confronted him, and when he tried to leave, I stopped him. Silence enveloped the room, broken only by the crackling of the fire. I didn't want him to die, she whispered, choking on her words. I just wanted the truth. Emma reached out, taking Sarah's hand in hers gently. We all carry burdens, she said softly, but maybe this is our chance to let go. As the fire burned lower, the whispers returned louder than ever, filling the cabin with voices both familiar and unknown. Leave, they chanted, leave or join us. Jake stood up, his stance firm. Enough, he declared, raising his voice. We've paid for our sins. It's time to move on. The whispers faltered momentarily, then ceased altogether, replaced by an oppressive silence outside. The wind picked up, howling through the trees, as if protesting their defiance. We done it? Emma asked tentatively. I think so, Jake replied, though uncertainty lingered in his tone. Sarah looked around at the others, feeling a strange sense of peace settle over her. For the first time in months she felt free. The silence in the cabin stretched endlessly, broken only by the faint crackling of the dying fire. Outside, the wind howled louder than before, as if nature itself rebelled against what they had done. Sarah stared at the empty space where the whispers had been moments ago. Her heart still raced, but beneath the fear she felt something else, relief. Maybe even hope. Is it over? She asked, her voice barely audible. I don't know, Jake admitted, his eyes scanning the shadows in the corners of the room. We've faced our truths, but I don't think that's enough. Emma nodded, slowly agreeing with him. The curse isn't just about us, she said softly. It's about everyone whose lives were destroyed by these places, these tragedies. Sarah thought back to the journal, the map, the names etched into the basement wall. All those lives connected through pain and loss. She realized now that their suffering wasn't isolated. It was part of a larger cycle, one that needed to be broken completely. Then, "We finish it," Sarah said firmly, surprising even herself. Her voice grew stronger as she continued, "Whatever it takes, we end this tonight." Jake exchanged a glance with Emma, then nodded. "Let's do it." They gathered around the table, laying out the map once more. Each marked location pulsed faintly, as if alive, responding to their presence. "We need to go back," Emma said suddenly, her finger tracing the lines connecting the cursed places. "Every spot tied to this web needs closure back." Sarah echoed incredulously. "After everything we've been through, you want us to revisit those places?" "Yes," Emma insisted, "because running won't solve anything. We have to face it head on, or it'll never stop." Jake stood up, straightening his shoulders. "If that's what it takes, then let's move." Without another word, they extinguished the fire, plunging the cabin into darkness. Guided only by flashlights, they stepped outside into the stormy night. The wind whipped at their clothes and rain began to fall, soaking them within minutes. Their first destination was Sarah's house. The journey back felt longer than before, each mile heavy with dread. When they arrived, Sarah hesitated, staring at the darkened window's eye. "Can't go in there," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You have to," Emma urged gently. "This is where it started, for all of us." Taking a deep breath, Sarah led the way inside. The air was colder here, thick with an unnatural chill. They moved directly to the basement, descending the stairs cautiously. At the bottom, Sarah approached the wall where the names were carved. She ran her fingers over the letters, feeling the grooves beneath her skin. "These aren't just names," she said softly. "These are souls trapped here, waiting for justice." Jake knelt beside her, pulling out a lighter from his pocket. "What do we do?" he asked. "Burn it," Sarah replied without hesitation. "Burn it all together." They set fire to the journals, the photographs, anything tied to the curse. Flames licked hungrily at the old wood, spreading quickly across the walls. As the fire roared, Sarah felt a strange sense of release, like chains breaking within her. The whispers returned briefly, screaming in protest before fading into nothingness. Next, they traveled to the forest where Emma and Jake had lost Claire and Mark. The trees seemed darker here, their branches twisting like skeletal hands reaching out to stop them. In the clearing where the spirit woman had appeared, they built another fire, feeding it with remnants of their past belongings, letters and objects tied to their guilt. As the flames consumed everything, Emma fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm sorry, Claire," she cried, her voice breaking. "I should have protected you." Sarah placed a hand on her shoulder. "You couldn't save her, Emma, but maybe now she can rest." Finally, they reached Lily's house. Standing in the attic, surrounded by the dusty trunk's contents, they repeated the ritual one last time, burning every trace of the curse until only ash remained. When the final flames died down, the three of them stood together in the attic, breathing heavily. The oppressive weight that had haunted them for so long was gone, replaced by an unfamiliar lightness. "Do you think it worked?" Jake asked, breaking the silence. "I think so," Emma replied, smiling weakly. For the first time in days, Sarah looked at them both, her heart swelling with gratitude and relief. "We're free," she said simply, but as they prepared to leave, a soft glow filled the room. Illuminated in the center was a single figure, Claire. Her form shimmered, translucent yet undeniably real. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice gentle and filled with warmth. Before vanishing completely, tears streamed down Emma's face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of healing. Outside, the sun rose, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink. For the first time in years, they felt truly alive. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find who you really are, Sarah said aloud, her words carrying a profound truth. "And sometimes facing your darkest fears sets you free," Emma added, as they walked away from the house, leaving behind the ashes of their past. They knew life would never be the same, but that was okay because they had each other and they had hope. The end.